Thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, so, all right, we're recording. Question before we start the interview, because I want to factor in like how you're feeling and all of this. So it's recording the video.
Mhm.
Uh, the interview itself, it could be video, it could be audio, it could just be written. I'm open to any of these formats,
I'm
but
okay to any and all, whatever you feels the best for what you want to put out afterward.
I love it. Hello, everyone. This is Justin Cobb from Insight coming to you from Arlington, Virginia. And today I have a very amazing guest. I can't wait for you all to meet her. Her name is Isvari. Isvari is coming to us. Correct me if I'm wrong, Isvari, but last I knew you were based out in Los Angeles. But I'm so happy and excited to have you here with us today. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you, Justin. I'm really excited to be here. Also, I didn't realize you were in Arlington. It's kind of like home to me because I lived there for 7 years. Last time I lived any place like for a really long time. I was in Los Angeles. I'm now in the Bay Area, so I've been out in California for a minute.
I love it. I've never been to California. It is on my list, and especially now that I've been doing this work with Insight, I've been networking with a lot of you wonderful folks out in the West Coast and everything. So definitely need to make it on my list for sure.
Yeah.
There, as
It's
far
nice. It's very different. I've traveled extensively, and the biggest culture shock that I think I had was when I moved to DC. Moved to the Arlington area. I stayed near sort of Boston, and I was like, oh my God, this is so different from everything I'm used to. And I was born and raised in California. So
yes, different energies, different ways of being and everything, and
yeah.
learning how to adjust and navigate all of it. I'm here for it. Isvari, so you are the founder of You Voice. It's this awesome new collaborative that you are bringing into the fold. There, I'm I'm curious, and I know other audiences will be curious as well, but tell us more about what it is that you are doing in your work with You Voice.
Yes. So basically, we looked at the world and see all of these problems. And so many of them are either because of current social media and the way that it's promoted, outrage, fascism, echo chambers, advertisements, corporate addiction, or because those of us who do want to make a difference, don't have a place to go to make a difference. And so we really felt like we could solve those two problems at the same time while also providing a fantastic town square, which we view as a human right for all voices around the world to be heard. So we've been working behind the scenes for 2 years. We've already launched an editorial side to really create a pro-democracy platform that rewards folks for tangible impact they make in the world. And so, parts of our stuff are patent pending. We're working on developing and releasing our full algorithm and stuff, but we should have a public release early next year. And one of the things we're very passionate about is staying true to our nonprofit background and our ethics and making sure that we don't cost people what they really need online again, like sort of has happened with so many other platforms lately. So yeah, we're really excited. It's something that I, as an influencer and journalist, I'm really excited to be on myself. So it's sort of like creating a product for ourselves and then knowing and just seeing over the past year how many people are excited about it as well and want to join. So we're really just trying to get it right this time for the sake of everybody and then make sure it stays right.
I love it. And doing what you're doing is not an easy task, to say the least. Before we get into that work, though, if we can, in honor of Insight, I tell people all the time the roots for what we do in our professional and our adult lives, they don't just come out of the blue. Often they are shaped by what we are witnessing and encountering in our daily lives. Are you opening to time traveling with me? We're going to dial it
Yes,
a
of
little.
course.
I
Let's
love
do
it.
that.
Yeah. Yes, let's travel back to when Jan Isvari was growing up. What were you witnessing and encountering in the world?
Yeah, so I think my parents always raised me as super aware of what was going on. We were always watching the news. I always watched news from a very young age. Growing up in an immigrant family in Indian culture, there's a lot less sheltering of children. So there wasn't a time at which I wasn't allowed to learn about things that were happening in the world that were very violent: war, genocide, murder, sexual assault. Like, I was aware that was happening. And my parents also intentionally took us, my sister and I, with them when they traveled or worked overseas, so that we could genuinely like see other people's cultures, lives, the way people lived, also fundamentally understand our privilege. I spent a lot of time in India as well growing up, where my family's originally from. I'm originally from Bangalore, and the poverty was very extreme. And so it really occurred to me from a young age that, like, this isn't fair. Those of us with privilege should do something about it. So although I was very talented at like physics and math, and I did pursue that for a while until I was probably about 14, 15 years old, when I had to make the decision and like go to law school, I decided to go to law school because I wanted to be able to make a difference. And I am still very fascinated by the work that I was able to do in something like supernova cosmology or particle physics, which is so fascinating and incredible. But at the same time, I remember viscerally thinking people are dying. Like, whether or not the universe is expanding at a faster rate, as interesting as that is, people are dying. And so I transitioned into something where I could make more of a difference.
You know, there's that old Talmudic wisdom that talks about how the death of one person is as if it's the death of a whole world entire. And I don't know if you picked up on that during your physics and everything, but I actually see a lot of truth in that regard, because each human being is actually the host of all these living organisms and is, in their own sense, in their own universe. And we're connected to a much bigger part of that. And it's just, for lack of a better phrase, I like the analogy of the turtles, where it's turtles all the way down, and it's built to, like, your response just reminded me so much of that.
Yeah. No, exactly. You know, I feel like understanding how expansive the universe is, and then how rare and lucky we are to be alive, have a universe where matter can coalesce so we can have planets, just have an Earth and an habitable zone, right? And to take all of that beauty, that luck, that privilege, and go, I'm going to kill someone else. Like, I have never been able to understand that. And like, I know it happens. I understand how we get here, like systemically and politically, but I'm also like, this needs to stop. This is insane.
Mhm. Exactly. And one of the things you brought up that I'm curious if we can unpack it a little more. You mentioned that your family was originally from India and Bangalore. Yes. India itself is so diverse.
Yes.
It's to say, oh, I'm Indian, it only scratches the surface of it. So can you talk me through more about, like, like, in your perspective growing up?
No, I appreciate that you asked that way, because I think it's so insightful. I've actually been having a lot of conversations with people about race lately. And one of the things about India is obviously the big fractures are according to religion, not race. So you have a lot of intermarriage between things that would be considered different races in the United States. So I am half Kannadiga, half Tamilian, from two different states in South India. So I'm darker skinned and have like more of the features associated with South Indians, like curly hair, larger nose, etc. And there is a lot of colorism in India, and a lot of anti-blackness, sort of lowercase black, also uppercase black. And that can definitely impact your experiences in India as like a South Indian or a Tamilian. South India, I have experienced a lot of that in India and even in the United States. And so a lot of people in India do not associate with people from different countries and then different states in India, and then coming to the US. My parents experienced a lot of that because, like, a lot of the Tamilian community in the Bay Area where I grew up didn't want to associate with my mom because she's not Tamilian, and vice versa. So yeah, it's definitely, I think as an adult, I've described it a bit as kind of like being mixed race in the United States, but we don't really have the same language to deal with that, or the same, confronting that the same way in India.
And did you notice caste playing a major role in any of this as well? And here's the, folks, for those of you who are not familiar with this, and I'm still learning about this myself, so no judgments. We don't expect anyone to know everything about anyone's cultures at any given point in time, but we're going to essentially unpack this even more for you folks, because they're, again, boxes. But Isvari, people don't realize that like in India, you have all these different religious traditions, and then the legacy of the caste system also plays a role in the ethnic histories of all the various people from India, Pakistan, all these different places. There, in your case, though, what would you say the role caste was in shaping a lot of these narratives?
Yeah. So, like most privileged, I would say, families in India, we don't really talk about caste. It's very taboo, like in the cities, to talk about caste. Like there are laws against caste, enforcing caste, having like discriminating by caste, right? The current Indian government is really trying to get rid of caste. So if you live in a city where there is privilege and structure, or you've moved to the United States, you probably don't talk about caste and don't want to talk about caste because it's a very harmful, insidious, and sort of shameful part of Indian history. But it still obviously has a really strong grip in rural areas, in the villages, in a lot of India that doesn't have access maybe to the same education and to the modern push to like get away from the caste system. So it has not affected my life very much, but I don't want to say that like it doesn't affect tons of people to this day. There are still people who are considered untouchable or Dalits, and the Indian government actually has quotas to make sure that there are enough of those seats being filled at universities and jobs, etc. And sometimes, even though there are quotas, they're not filled because there simply aren't enough people to fill them because there's still so much discrimination. And I think, again, looking at it from an American racial lens, it's crazy, right? You wouldn't be able to tell by looking at people that they are a different religion or a different caste. You are able to tell maybe what race they are, but race doesn't matter as much as in India. So it's, again, interesting, I think, how discrimination works in India a little bit differently than the United States.
Oh my goodness. So much of this is informing a lot of your own upbringing. And now we get into the topic of, okay, so these are like some of the things you're witnessing and encountering in your home and in your personal life. But what do you notice when you go into the workforce? Because let's be honest, it's a completely different experience when you walk into these settings.
Yeah, so I've actually worked in India a little bit, but again, caste would never be discussed in the workplace in India. In the United States, I have definitely experienced both a lot of sexism and a lot of racism. And I found it very interesting that in my experiences, it's often been one or the other, because growing up in the Bay Area, there's a lot of sexism here. There are a lot of Indian men in tech. There's a lot of Indian men in science, in business, and universities, and all of the fields I was going into, but there is so much internalized misogyny among Indian women, as well as just outright sexism from others. My own culture, extended family, and all was always very sexist, and it's part of why my parents stood a little bit apart from that, because my dad was raised by a single mom. My mom's obviously a woman, 5 brothers, so they were very feminist, and that was like not the same with other families here. The Bay Area is also extremely racist to Black people, to Hispanic people. Like there was a lot of stuff growing up, but I think sexism was something that was somehow a commonality among all of our various immigrant groups. When I moved to the DC area, I felt that sexism became mostly about physical harassment and assault. Like it was very much about the lack of respect women have on like Capitol Hill or at law firms or things like that. It was very much a lack of physical safety, not a lack of intellectual equality, if that makes sense. And it was a very interesting shift on the sexism front. And then for the racism side, I feel like that was a whole, like, it was so much more glaring for me on the East Coast. And in a way, I'm grateful because it allowed me to see more of the inequalities I grew up with that I hadn't noticed because I was younger and it was less glaring. But I've definitely been the only on several teams. And I think it comes with this innate pressure to represent every single minority ever. And that's not something obviously that I can do. But a lot of that boils down to people's experiences with folks who don't look like them. And I found a lot of enclaves on the East Coast where genuinely people just don't have a single friend or a single coworker of color, so they don't know how to deal with it.
That's a lot to unpack in a good way. This episode is brought to you by Cham Cham. The Cham Cham is a Caribbean inspired beverage. The company itself is founded and rooted in legacy and history. It is so inspiring the work that they are doing, bringing culture and heritage to the DMV area. And I'm so grateful to be partnering with them. I'm going to go ahead and leave a link down to their website in the comments. They're people who are watching this content, you all get access to a special promo code that gives you a 10% discount off of any Chum Chum beverage. They have all kinds of unique flavors. There's something there for everyone. And it's something that you can drink, whether it is in celebration or just going about your day-to-day routine. So definitely check them out. I know I personally enjoyed learning more about them, and they're delicious. So hello, why not? There, go ahead. Their code insight, INSIGHT. There, go ahead and do that, folks, and get that 10% discount. There, every little bit adds up. You know this, and I know in a good way, because it really does demonstrate just how divided the United States and even nations around the globe really are. And there's a reason why. You touched on this before already, but there is a reason why we have a rise in fascism and harmful rhetoric, not just against like quote unquote racial and ethnic minorities, even though you all are the global majority. I just want to put that out there for folks. Hey, in case you're not listening, there are more Black and brown people in the world. It's amazing. Definitely do some research on it. I digress though. But one of the things that really one caught my attention, but also I'm sure audiences would pick up on as well, is the fact that you are speaking from the perspective of someone who you're navigating a level of privilege in one country, but then you go into another country and you easily get relegated into a particular sphere in that system where it's not that level of privilege. Like, what kinds of nuances did you pick up on from this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big divide growing up was always going back home to India, where we were the privileged people. And my parents here were more like middle income working, like immigrants had worked their way up from literally nothing. And in India had like a lot more wealth comparatively, because especially 20 years ago, India was incredibly poor. And so having an American salary meant literally living like what I would consider royalty in India, right? People had servants, people had large houses, servants do everything, cook, clean, like people wouldn't let servants like eat with them. Like it's a whole other world, right? And you're the privileged class and people would treat you like that. You know, where we went back home in India, I was lighter skinned than a lot of the folks there because my mom is lighter. And then here, obviously, I'm one of the darker people. And so I think it's just, again, night and day, like how everything is different. I think one of the interesting things is, having lived a lot in Europe as well, how different immigrant countries treat different immigrants. And I found that difference very interesting as well, because it often matters to people which type of immigrants immigrated to your country, right? So in the United States, there's a stereotype of Asian immigrants and Indians being more in tech and science or being more privileged immigrants, because that's who we let immigrate here. There are other countries like the UAE where the Indians who they let immigrate there are people who are laborers, people who are hotel workers. And so they're actually treated incredibly poorly, because they're more like, I mean, some of them are just in straight up slavery because their jobs are not associated with as much privilege. And it's the same immigrants, right? Like it's the same country, but the stereotypes are so different. So if you go to Dubai as an Indian, you're going to be treated very differently than if you're in the US as an Indian, Canada, the UK, etc. And obviously different from back home. And I also think one of the things that I really enjoy is kind of understanding how colonial history, because it's always post-colonial history, like has impacted different countries. So why people treat people differently in different countries almost always has to do with the ways those countries tried to move on from post-colonialism, tried to grow their economies, what sort of immigrants they allowed when, the power those immigrants had, the way those immigrants treated the other people in those countries. So like when I was in Kenya, absolutely amazing. Fit right in. Nobody treated me like I didn't belong. Really appreciated the day-to-day subtle like lack of misogyny in certain ways that I had been so used to in the West. And there was so much, I guess, solidarity between Black people and Indian people who had fought against the British. And that was something that I thought was really nice. And it was really lovely to see colonial history and museums from that perspective instead of like the British Museum.
Mhm. Oh, wow. And it really does touch on a major issue that is not really talked about. So because of how the legacy of Western imperialism, it did play a major role in how the world was shaped to this day. But then there's also the legacies of different forms of imperialism that are still carrying on to this day. I actually brought on uh, actually someone that I know here in the DC area who shared her experience as a Taiwanese woman and being a religious freedom advocate in China. Yes, the stories I heard from this woman, oh my goodness, the courage she had to have in order to do
Yeah.
that kind of work. It's so pinnacle, but it also touches on something that I feel, and you voice seems to be touching on this as well, is it really cuts through the noise of us versus them divisions
Yeah.
and gets to the root of, okay, what can we collectively do as humans to uplift and support one another? I'm curious though, what was the journey that led up to this? Because no one just wakes up and says, oh, I'm going to found a town square and we're going to create pro-democracy conversations. That like,
Yeah, no, no, not at all. So actually, it was a market need. So we had a sister nonprofit, which was also accidentally founded during the pandemic. There were a lot of people who really needed help. And I was like, sure, I'll help however I can. And one thing led to another, and it went viral, and people offered to help others, a website, mentorship. So that sister nonprofit, Dweebs Global, had a ton of mentors who we sorted by the skill sets that they had and the passions that they had. And very quickly, we realized that that model and the freedom that they had to speak and share thoughts, the ways in which they were in the small communities they were in, were creating incredible work product for the world. Like we're creating these incredible ideas on how to tangibly impact movements and then actually change things moving forward. So if somebody had an idea to create a software that would help visually impaired people, they would be able to find other people who could help them code. They could go and find a marketer. They could find somebody who worked at Google, right? They could find those people and then actually work on projects. The happiness that brought them, the way that made them more mentally healthy, plus also creating this impact product in the world, plus having the leadership skills, advice, and all to get it launched, it was just incredible. It's like the best of group projects. And I think that model, we wanted to figure out, how do we scale that? How do we take that to the world? Around the same time that we were figuring that out, a lot of our mentors were like, we just want a place to write. Our voices are not being heard. The New York Times doesn't publish articles written about things outside of America or things written in a weird way. And so we were like, okay, we can start a blog for you. And that also led to a part of what eVoice is today. And then finally, one of our board members at the time, Scott Lamb, was vice president of Medium. Before that, he'd been vice president of BuzzFeed. And I remember thinking BuzzFeed and Medium did something really clever and special in terms of trying to figure out what we can do in the intersection of social media and media. And so I think of this as like the third in that sequence, thinking about ways to interact between social media and media, and thinking about how to connect people more meaningfully and convince people those meaningful connections are worth more than follower count. So we had to think of creative ways to reward impact and then get people their dopamine rush from impact instead of follower count. And I think then what happened is Twitter sold to X around the same time as well. It became X, sold to Elon Musk. And it was very clear there was a rise of fascism and a degrading of quality of content and fact checking on the site. And it just was like a perfect trifecta of reasons to create an alternative. And we've done it so very intentionally. We have not rushed to market. We are not trying to make $1 billion overnight. We're not trying to go viral. We are trying to intentionally build and grow a healthy online town square that can last humans for a long time, not like a 5 to 10 year flash in the pan social media life cycle. So we call ourselves social media because that's what we're most similar to, but we are so meaningfully distinct. I think it's fair to say we're not even really the same thing.
there, what you're doing is essentially passing the baton and allowing this marathon to keep going. Social movement, social change, discourse. Is it frustrating? Absolutely, but these things do take time. And I used to get so irritated with the people who would say, "Oh, this is a marathon, not a race." But now that I'm older and more experienced, I get the adage. It took me a moment, folks. I got there, though. There, I see it. But Isvari, I'm curious. What were some of the challenges that you faced in actually like bringing a U voice to the fore, because this is not something that just comes out of the blue, because there's really serious
Yeah.
things going on in this world that even led up to, oh, hey, we need to found a U voice.
Yeah. So I would say one of the biggest challenges has always been being non-traditional, right? Whether that means I am a woman of color founder in tech, or whether it means I am we have in general a very global team, a very global audience. We are not just America focused. This isn't a Silicon Valley tech company. Whether it means we're a nonprofit led initiative instead of a company. Whether it's because fundraising in the tech world is still so white and so male that so much of the money goes into those areas, and so it is not even 10 times harder. I often tell people I was in physics, I was in national security. Those are two of the whitest male fields you can imagine, and I think nonprofits are worse. I think like tech startups and nonprofits are way worse. There's absolutely no push, especially now with the pushback against DEI and against sort of wokeness, this anti-woke war. There is no push to no significant push to really equalize VC funding or donor funding. There's no real change in this area. And so I would say that's still one of the biggest challenges we face. And end of the day, we've met that challenge just by being better than everyone else in terms of a product. We're not trusting people to take a chance on us. We're able to prove that we can produce what we want. We have created an entire product marketing team. We have more than sort of 80, 90 members around the world, staff who are really contributing their time, their energy, their work into this product. We were volunteer funded for a long time. So we just made it happen. We were like, that's it. If we don't make it happen, nobody will make it happen. It's not going to be in the interest of big business to make this happen at this moment in time. And now that we have something that is successful, that is growing, obviously now everybody is interested and wants a piece of it. And we can show that they will make, they will make a difference to what we're doing, or they'll make if their investment will make a profit, whatever it is that they want to hear. We've always had to prove that. And I would say one of the challenges there is when you don't have people really early on, like a year ago, who are willing to just take that risk or believe in you, or like, I know I really believe in the work that you're doing, so I want to donate to this cause and make it happen. It just makes everything 10 times harder because we're not billionaire backed. But I think that's kind of the point, is we're not billionaire backed.
Absolutely. A lot of what your work is doing is filling the gaps that have been left behind by our traditional systems, our institutions. And it's more pinnacle now than ever because, as you mentioned before, there is this huge backlash against the inclusion initiatives, diversity, equity, belonging, all the letters. I like to call this, and I also love to call the LGBTQ scene this as well for folks, but they're distinctive things, but I like calling them both the soup because we're wholesome and we got a bunch of letters in them. But
it's really sad that things have changed so much. I literally when I worked at in law firms, I really thought things were going to get better. There was a lot of racism and sexism. It was at least something that you could raise and they would ignore. Now people are very blatant. They know there's nothing you can do, so they're just very happily going about their day saying the most offensive things, and it's just crazy. I had somebody tell us that we are racist against white men, and it was literally because they were upset we weren't centering white men. And I'm just like, that's every other organization. So what looks like equality looks like discrimination because they're so used to the systemic power. And it's obviously we're majority minority. Like I am one of many minorities, and it's always hard going from this and then going back into the rest of the world and being like, oh, to the rest of the world, we're somehow less than because we're a bunch of brown and black people. That's always crazy to me. That's like, what is going through people's heads to think that?
And on top of that, it's so easy to get caught up in silos, and that's essentially what happened And the reason why U Voice was even founded to begin with is because people got siloed into all these different conversations. And even amongst minority-led organizations and companies, that silo happens. We
Yep.
see the rhetoric that's happening within like Indian and South Asian Desi communities. We see the rhetoric that's happening in a lot of Hispanic Latin communities. Like there's so much division even within folks that people just assume are all on the same page. But
Exactly.
anyone who knows people and understands how people work, guess what? You'd be surprised. We're individuals first before we are categories, and we all think differently. It's wild. Definitely,
Absolutely. Hmm.
yeah.
Also,
It's
I mean, I think conservatism and fascism in general is on the rise worldwide, which means the people who might be thin political allies in the States are not going to be allied with you back in their home country where they're in power. They're just allied here for personal interest. And that's something that's always pissed me off as like a minority in many different ways. But it's also something that I think is plaguing the left wing right now, right? I think it's something that people are very quick to point out the right wing does, which is true. But purity testing and fantasizing about silencing people who don't agree with you, rampant racism and sexism, that's also present on the left, especially the very far left. And it can be challenging when you're working on a goal to recognize the goal needs to be more important than who your allies are. And I think that's something that everybody has lost. But I often share the story of when we worked to end like criminal, like the death penalty in Virginia. The way that it was done was basically with activists who were pro criminal justice reform along with pro-lifers. Very different political units in other political categories who probably don't agree about anything, vote for the same candidates, etc., but have this issue in common. Today, I worry what would happen is people would criticize the movement for including pro-lifers, being like, why are you including these impure allies who are clearly not good enough? Or the pro-life friends of pro-lifers would be like, why are you working with these woke, terrible, diverse people? And so this would never happen, even though they agreed on this specific thing, let's end the death penalty. And that saddens me. That's the type of thing that I think we're here to fix. Like, hey, to the people you help, they're not here. They would rather be helped regardless of who helps them. It's so ivory tower and privileged to go, let's care about our moral propriety over people's lives. And so that's what I'm really hoping U Voice can do as well. Like you were saying, people are human first. So really recognizing the shared humanity that we have, getting to know people from different backgrounds, and thereby showing people that their intolerance is not necessarily a path to success regardless. What I do want to emphasize is that the other thing about running a platform that believes in equality or justice first, that is run by majority, minority, et cetera, is for us, there isn't that false equivalence. There isn't that paradox of intolerance. For us, like we talk about this tolerance as a social contract. If you break it, we're not going to tolerate you. So we're not a situation where it's like, oh, you can be a neo-Nazi. That's the same thing as supporting Black Lives Matter. No, that's not. That's not. We're not there. We're not tolerating that. That's not what this is going to turn into. And I think when people insult things like that for turning into a liberal echo chamber, what people fail to realize is either you protect against people being racist and homophobic and terrible to minorities, or those voices will not come out, because there are so many of us who are not willing to put up with the insane vitriol. We'd rather just stay quiet. Even as an influencer who's very used to it, there have been times when the vitriol got so much I would put my phone away for a day. If that affects me, you're talking about that will affect thousands of people who put their phone away for a week, a year. That's not what I want to do, right? We really want to provide a place where people feel like they can speak.
So key, so key. And one of the things I'm curious about as well, because you talk about the fact that you are I want to make sure I got my phrasing right, but you're like, so many different ways to put this, but essentially you are a global majority owned company and brand, and you're building this space. And at the same time, you're also opening it up for people who want to make changes in these systems, regardless of their categories and titles. I feel like this is going to be a very nuanced conversation. Audiences, feel free. This might be a roller coaster there, but we're going to do this anyway. But for those people who have been growing up in Western-dominated, Eurocentric organizations and institutions where they were the majority, in that regard and held that privilege and status, but also were well-meaning and meant to do right. So what do you advise for these folks if they choose to shift and gear towards working in a collaboration with you all?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I honestly don't think we think like that at the organization. And I think people figure that out really quickly once they join, right? The thing about when the global majority is the majority at an organization, we no longer feel like we have to, hopefully, this is my dream and I think it's played out. We don't feel like we have to perform, right? So we don't code switch anymore. We are our authentic selves in the workplace, and also it feels normal to us. So there are many, many cultural differences, because even our C-suite is like from 7-8 different countries, right? Like there are many cultural differences. And we've learned to, really assume that people are coming from their cultural background and leading with empathy, right? Like that might not be impolite in their culture. So, talk it through. That being said, right, if you come into that, kind of everybody's a minority, right? Like we are not 9 Indians or anything, right? Like it's just everybody from around the world. And so everybody coming in is pretty unique background, where you're the only, in some way, only person from the country you're from, or maybe the only, like, I don't know, you're not going to ever be the only person on race or gender or sexuality, which are like the big things people think about. But there's something about you that's going to be very unique, because we genuinely come from all over the place. So I think because of that, people genuinely belong. Like we're here for a mission. We are here to pursue that. It's a space where people can feel a little bit safer to not have to identify with their color first or see color first. I can speak for myself. I've really appreciated that. I've appreciated being able to joke about things that I think most people in other workplaces just wouldn't get, or wouldn't be able to, have that sort of comfort with to talk about in the first place. Every other workplace I've been at, the minute I talk about race, it becomes an issue. It's like, well, you raised this issue and now are you actually accusing us of being racist? And it's just like, you can't even raise issues as they come up. One thing I absolutely love about UVoice and our work culture is just we're able to chat about these things casually, because they impact our lives as people of color, global majority. And it doesn't have to be like an issue, right? It's not something where people get defensive immediately. People are very willing to talk about it. People are very willing to just share experiences. People are very willing to just be the ways that we are in our communities, but rarely are able to bring to work, for lack of a better word. I feel like sharing examples, people would be like horrified. I'd be like, oh my God, is that what it's like? It's not meant to like attack like I think traditional professionalism, if that works for people, but so often traditional professionalism is just a guise to perpetuate patriarchy or whiteness or whatever's considered the standard in the Western world, to the point where even when they welcome minority culture, it is infantilizing or it is otherizing or exoticizing that culture. And there's like, we cannot do that here. We are genuinely from everywhere around the world. And so there's just that comfort knowing it cannot happen here.
There, Isvari. For those folks who are interested in working with UVoice, your mission, what it is you're trying to do, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so if you go to UVoice, yuvoice.org / my first name, Isvari, you can sign up to the newsletter there. That's the easiest way to do that right now. And that's a really great way to both keep up with everything happening at UVoice. And I also share some thoughts every week, top 5 news stories. Great way to just keep up with what's going on in the world without being overwhelmed. But yeah, you can read amazing stories written by a ton of people around the world at uvoice.org and just kind of see the community we've built behind the scenes that's getting ready for the launch of our full product. And then obviously stay tuned for the product. Use the product when it comes out. If you want to be an early tester, try to get on those lists. Always really happy for feedback.
I love it. Isvari, thank you for coming on to the show today. I greatly appreciate the time that you took to share your story with us.
Thank you, Justin. It's an absolute pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Of course. And folks, this was Isvari's perspective. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Insight. Definitely stay tuned. We have more of it coming. Until then, be well. Don't forget to subscribe to my Patreon, folks. Every little bit counts. Your subscription will support me as I pursue this journey, as I bring you the stories of all these amazing people from around the globe doing their part to make a difference, building community, sharing insights that can empower teams and individuals to tackle the issues of our time. It's phenomenal. Definitely take a look at that. Subscribe to get bonus content as well, including exclusive looks at behind the scenes and bonus content that you're not going to find on any of my platforms. Don't miss out. Also, I'll throw this link down in the comments as well, but don't forget to subscribe to my Patreon and support my work. There, did you all hear that? There, DC's alive and well.